I will leave you with some homework at the end of today, and we will circle back to it next week. I want to back into the message today with a story for you. This took place back in November, and the context was the craziness of this church had sort of overtaken my life, and my job had become all-consuming. And the way I noticed this was not getting enough time with my kids, particularly my two oldest boys, which is never a good thing because I'll just shoot straight with you. They come first, right? My parenting comes before my leadership. They only get one dad. So I'm noticing things are a little bit out of whack, and to sort of hit the reset button, I decide I'm going to take both of my two older boys out for a one-on-one daddy dinner date. Okay? So I take my oldest son, Tig, out for dinner. He gets to pick the spot. He picked KFC before it closed. I had never been there. But we're at KFC. We get our food and we sit down. And I go, "How's your day?" And what you got to know about my oldest son is he's a lot like me. Drives me nuts. But he's like kind of this clear, linear, logical thinker, kind of matter of fact. So he goes, "Dad, I had a rough day. 4 things went wrong today." It kind of like starts listing them like Dwight Schrute. You know, he's like, "Number 1, recess was cut short today. Number 2, my friend Cooper got hurt at recess today. Number 3, I got a stomach ache at recess today." He's in 3rd grade, so like school means recess, right? Then he goes, "Number 4, my teacher is the only teacher that allows kids in class to chew gum. So all the other kids have gum to chew in the class, but I don't have any gum to chew in the class, and I want gum to chew in the class." So I said, "Well, that's 4 things, buddy. Which one do you want to talk about?" "I want to talk about chewing gum in class." I said, "All right. Well, what do you think we could do about this?" And the only idea he could come up with was me buying gum for him to chew in class, which was certainly an option, right? But then I thought, he's 9 years old, and he has never really bought anything for himself in his life. This is kind of in his price range. So I looked at him, and I was like, "Well, hey, buddy, that's an option, but I can think of some other options. Do you want to hear them?" He's like, "Sure." I'm like, "Number 1. You could learn how to be content and not have any gum. It'd be really hard because everybody else has it, but you could learn how to live without gum." He's like, "I don't like that one." "Any others?" I said, "Yeah, number 2. Maybe you could a friend could give you a piece of their gum every once in a while. That seems like an option." He's like, "No, that's against the rules." I said, "Oh, wow, rules. Well, how about number 3? Your birthday is like a week and a half away. I guarantee you, if you ask for some, you will get some gum for your birthday." He's like, "That's too long to wait." I said, "All right, well, here's the last one. Number 4 would be maybe you use some of your allowance money to buy some gum on your own." And he looks at me and he goes, "But I worked hard for that money." And that's when I knew we were onto something, right? So for the next 30 minutes, the entire dinner, he deliberated about whether it was worth it to use his money to buy gum. He asked me all kinds of questions. How much does it cost? How many pieces come in each pack? For 30 minutes, he deliberated. Numerous times, he tried to push it back on me and demand that I just buy it for him. Each time, I responded by going, "Well, Tig, you have to decide, what do you want? What do you value more, your allowance money in your piggy bank or some gum to chew in the classroom? Which one do you want?" This deliberation continued for 2 days until finally he decided to use his own resources to buy said gum to chew in class. And he was proud that he was able to do it on his own. What's the point of this story, besides the fact that I'm a stingy parent? Well, it's this. We all have to do this every day in our lives. We all have to do this. We all have to count the cost. We have to decide what we value in our lives. We have to count the cost and decide what we value the most. And sometimes this comes in the form of really big decisions, right? Do you take the new job? Pay increase would be nice. but it also requires more travel and time away from the home. What do you value? Which one do you decide? Do we get the bigger home? Man, that new space would be incredible, but the mortgage payment is barely affordable. What do you do? Our marriage is a mess. Do we humble ourselves and get help, or do we call it quits? I've got an addiction, right? Alcoholism, whatever. Do I let other people know? Do I ask for help, or do I stay where I am? What do we value? This happens in big ways all the time, but it also happens in like small and subtle ways in our everyday lives. Do I eat that donut and continue to fill out my dad bod? Right? We have to make choices about how much we value our taste buds every day. Every day. Do I pick up the phone and scroll Facebook, or do I sit and be with my family? Do I hit the snooze button and get more sleep, or do I get up and exercise, right? Thousands of choices. You guys, thousands of choices every day that demand that we determine or decide what we value. Thousands of choices every day. And none of those choices is value neutral. Every single choice you make says something about what you value in some way. By the simple fact that you say yes to this thing, you have to say no to that thing, which means the thing you're saying yes to, you value more than the thing you're saying no to. And we do this all kinds of ways every day in our lives. There's no escaping this. There's no escaping counting the cost, and there's no escaping counting the cost even when it comes to following Jesus. If you want to follow Jesus, you need to count the cost. You have to decide ahead of time how much you value him in your life. What priority are you going to give him? And here's the rub. It's the challenge for today. Jesus will not settle for second place in your life. He ain't going to settle for second place. He demands that top spot. He wants to be the highest priority in your life. So here's our bottom line for today. Comes in the form of a question this week rather than a statement. This is a question for each one of you. Are you willing to give up everything in order to follow Jesus? Are you willing to give up everything in order to follow Jesus? To become a follower of Jesus, a disciple, requires that you make Jesus your top priority in life. You give him the highest priority above everything else. You give him that top spot, such that you're willing to say yes to him and no to everything else when those two come in competition with one another. You give him that top spot. And the question for today is, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to give up everything in order to follow Jesus? Let's pray together as we get started. Jesus, we thank you that salvation is a free gift. It's all grace. And yet, in order to receive it, we need to surrender completely. And so I pray that you would guide us and lead us individually today into that place of sweet surrender, where we entrust and submit ourselves fully to you. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. So I need to tell you, it's always fun. I enjoy, preaching when the topic is really fun and exciting. God's grace, God's love. That's the fun stuff to preach on. Today's message isn't one of those. All right? Today's message is incredibly hard-hitting. This is a high challenge, high truth message that I'm going to give today. And it comes straight from the mouth of Jesus. So if we have issues, if we stumble today, really we're going to be stumbling over the teachings of Jesus. We want a full picture of Jesus at this church, which means we can't just preach on the nice things. We have to preach even on the difficult things that Jesus said and taught. Yeah? So I'm just kind of letting you know there's going to be some truth bombs today from Jesus. And so here's our passage, Luke 14:25 through 35, or 34. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, it says. Now, just a note, notice here, Jesus is surrounded by large crowds of people. This is the context. Large crowds are traveling with Jesus at this point. So what Jesus is about to say, he says to a large group of people. Turning to them, this large crowd, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, Yes, even their own life, such a person cannot, say it with me, cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me, say it again, cannot be my disciple. So let's pause here for a moment. I want to name this. The word hate here isn't to be taken literally. Okay, Jesus isn't teaching that you literally have to hate your parents and your wife and kids and even yourself to follow him. That's not what he's teaching here. The word hate here is hyperbolic. Jesus is exaggerating. He often did this in the Gospels. He often would exaggerate in order to make a point. But the point Jesus is making is no less offensive. He's saying, in order to follow me, I need to come before your family. And listen, friends, if there was ever a focus on the family culture, this is it. First century Judaism, hyper-focused on the family, valued the family, honoring parents, honoring your family, real important. So this is bold, audacious, offensive stuff that Jesus is saying, to say following me comes before honoring your family. And so is the assertion that you need to pick up your cross, which is in the first century like an instrument of torture and death. Also very, very offensive stuff. You guys sensing this? Unless you do these things, you cannot be my disciple. Then he gives two examples. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. So my family, since I was a little kid, has been vacationing on Sanibel Island in Florida. And so we get to go, every couple of years. And it's an island, so you can get on bikes and kind of make your way around. And every time we go, when we bike around, we pass this house that's incredible. It's like this mansion, but it's unoccupied. So you can kind of like walk in and look at it. And it's incredible. I mean, no expense was spared on this house. Amazing pool in the back, a fountain, like you can tell, no expense spared. Problem is, it's not complete. So whoever purchased this house and was building it or renovating it clearly ran out of funds, and they couldn't complete what they started. Sort of I have this contemporary example in my mind when Jesus talks about someone who starts a building and wasn't able to finish it. And he says, and it's just like that if you were to go to war and you don't consider how big the opposing force is. Both of those examples would be disastrous and embarrassing, right? And then Jesus ends with this. He says, salt is good, unless you have high blood pressure, right? Salt is good, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. So the point Jesus is making here is, disciples who don't live like disciples are like unsalty salt. Followers of Jesus who don't live like Jesus are like unsalty salt. That's what Jesus is saying here. And then he ends with kind of this mic drop moment where he's just like, whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. Boom. And he just leaves them in tension. That'll become important because as I was trying to figure out how to end this message and put like a bow on it, I realized there is no bow. Jesus didn't resolve the tension for the people he just left them there in that mess. So you're going to kind of be left with a mess today, okay? Listen, at the heart of this passage today is an invitation to become a follower of Jesus and a challenge to count the cost beforehand. There's like this amazing invitation to become a follower of Jesus, but a challenge to count the cost. And the emphasis in our passage today clearly falls on the challenge side of things. So last week when Jake preached, remember, it was all about invitation, this huge banquet where everybody's invited. Well, this week, Jesus follows that teaching with a teaching about how you have to count the cost before you say yes. This is hard-hitting stuff, right? You 3 times he says the phrase, you cannot be my, if you don't count the cost, you cannot be my disciple. At one point he says, unless you're willing to give up everything, you cannot be my disciple. It's tough stuff. And I want to be sure we sort of put this together theologically, because some people have a hard time with this tension. So salvation, you guys, is a free gift from God. Yeah? All grace. Not by works. You can't earn it. You can't achieve it. Not on you, right? No one can boast. Free gift, all grace. We got that? Okay. So it's free. But at the same time, you guys, it will cost you everything. And the reason why is because in order to receive it, you got to surrender completely. You got to give up who you are in order to follow Jesus. So it's free, but there's a cost to it. There's a costly obedience. That's why Dietrich Bonhoeffer, his most famous book is literally called The Cost of Discipleship. And he just hammers this cheap grace we've been giving out. So it's free, it's all grace, it's a gift, but in order to open up your hands, you got to surrender your life. And surrendering means you give Jesus that top spot. You make him the highest priority in your life. He's your primary and ultimate allegiance. You say yes to him over and above everything else that could be a threat to that. He gets that top spot. It's free, but it costs everything. So there's an invitation in this passage to everybody. Anybody can be a disciple of Jesus. Universal invitation. But there's a challenge then to count the cost beforehand. It's free. It's all grace. We don't earn the invitation. But in order to say yes to it, we need to surrender completely. It's free, but it costs everything. Is this making sense? Yeah? All right. Now here's the question. Is this the way we've been calling people into discipleship? Here's how Jesus invited people into discipleship. And the question I want to ask today is, are we doing it the way Jesus did it? Is this the way we've been calling, we being the American church, the evangelical church, is this how we've been calling people into discipleship? And I think if you reflect on that question for 3 seconds, you'll come to the conclusion that the answer is no. There's this massive gap, a seismic chasm between how Jesus invited people to become disciples and how we, the American church, have been inviting people to become followers of Jesus. This huge gap. Notice that when Jesus gives this teaching, the context is large crowds. Large crowds are now following and traveling with Jesus. And Jesus turns to these large crowds and he gives this ridiculously hard teaching. Unless you're willing to give up everything, you can't be my disciple. Unless you're willing to hate your mother and father, your wife and children, even your own self, you cannot be my disciple. This is hard stuff. And by the way, this is a horrendous marketing strategy. This is not a way to make friends and influence people. This is a way to lose friends and offend people. Yeah? I can imagine if I were one of the disciples, you can just imagine them sort of pulling Jesus aside after this moment and giving him some unsolicited advice. Hey, Jesus, we kind of had this huge crowd with us. First time we had a lot of people here. It was really exciting. Then you had to go talking about hating people, and then half of them left. Maybe next time when the crowds are so big, you could just dial it back a little bit. Right? But see, here's the thing, you guys. Jesus' primary aim was not attracting bigger and bigger crowds to himself. Jesus' primary aim was to make disciples. And in fact, go ahead and study this on your own. I've already done it for you. But you'll notice this theme throughout the Gospels that anytime the crowds get really big, Jesus sort of ups the intensity of his teaching in order to call them to deeper commitment. Throughout the Gospels, it seems that there's this underlining uneasiness Jesus has about crowds. When the crowds get big, he doesn't assume, oh, this is great. He assumes, oh, they must not be getting it. But because if they got what true discipleship is, they wouldn't be where they are. So maybe they're missing something. So I'm going to up the intensity of my teaching. I'm going to calibrate more challenge in order to put the onus on them about their true commitment. And the result usually was that large groups of people began to leave, and those that remained were truly committed. This is what's going on in our passage today. Happens in other places like John 6 after he gives people a bunch of bread to eat. And they're like, we want more bread. We want more bread. And he's like, do you really want the bread of life? Here's what it requires. And then they scatter. Over and over and over, you'll see this theme of when the crowds get big, Jesus ups the intensity of his teaching, calls for deeper commitment. The crowd thins out, but he's left with those who are truly committed. Is this making sense? All right. So, Jesus was not about attracting big crowds, but rather making disciples. He raises the intensity of his teachings when the crowds get big. But let's face it, we do the exact opposite. We, being the American evangelical church, it seems that we're actually obsessed with crowds. So our primary focus isn't making disciples, it's on getting bigger and bigger crowds into this thing we call the church. And we have all kinds of strategies to do that. Literally, the church growth movement will help you here. They tell you how to do it. You get professional worship leaders and decent speakers, and you run 1 million church programs, and people will come. And underneath all of this is a focus on us. How do we get bigger and bigger? How do we get more people to be part of this thing we're doing called church? We're obsessed with big crowds. We desire big crowds. We're motivated to gather big crowds. And it's compromising our faithfulness to multiplying disciples. We're obsessed with big crowds, where Jesus was about making disciples. And then when the big crowds showed up around Jesus, remember, he sort of raised the intensity of his teaching to calibrate their commitment, whereas we do the exact opposite. So when we get the big crowds here, we don't up the intensity of our teaching. We actually make it as simple and easy as possible for people. The quintessential example of this in most evangelical churches, when we have the biggest crowds here, is Christmas and Easter. And you'll notice in those services, pretty much everything crescendos with this connection prayer. We're not even presenting the gospel, we're just presenting this plan of salvation, and then we're asking people to pray a prayer and sort of welcome to the family of God. Now, I want you to hear me on this very carefully. I am not against connection prayers. Everybody got that? I thoroughly believe in inviting people to follow Jesus. It's super important. I give a lot of my life to inviting people to follow Jesus. And I believe prayer is an important part of that. Prayer is just talking with God. So if you want to become a follower of Jesus, you ought to talk to him about it, right? I'm not against connection prayers, but what I am against and have major concerns about is when we turn this prayer thing into some magic prayer formula. And so let's just have an honest moment here, you guys. Please, just have an honest moment here with me. Because the long term, Romans 10:9 says if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, confess with your mouth. By the way, to confess Jesus is Lord in the first century might get you killed because that means that Caesar isn't Lord. You confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart. That's like all of your being, the center of who you are, then you'll be saved. I believe that to be true. Yeah? Here's the problem. One of the long-term practices, even in this church, has not been asking people to confess anything with their mouths. It's you sit there and you pray something in your heart. And then you get to so you remain completely anonymous. We have no clue who you are. And then you get to take a little bag as you leave. Once again, we have no clue who you are. This has been the practice for a long time. It's been the normal methodology. You present the plan of salvation, you invite them to pray a simple prayer in their mind or heart, and you welcome to the family of God. And guys, listen, this is nowhere found in the life and teachings of Jesus. I have yet to find a time where Jesus attracts a massive crowd to himself, and everything culminates with him like bending down and writing a connection prayer in the sand. It is like, please pray this with me. You never see Jesus doing that. So there's something seriously wrong if the normal methodology doesn't even match the way Jesus did things. It's a problem. And again, I want to make it clear, I'm not against inviting people to begin following Jesus and using a prayer to do that, as long as the invitation is inviting them into actually following Jesus. Which is why, look, at Christmas, when I preached, I used a connection prayer. But we had them to confess something with their mouth. Then we said, if you did that, if you just prayed that, we want you to connect with one of our pastors after the service because we actually want to get to know you. This is a big deal, and we want to come around you and support you in this new church family and community that you're a part of. And the entire prayer was prefaced by, a discipleship metaphor. Salvation is a covenant relationship with God. So I talked about how marriage is it's like this marriage vow you're making. Jesus has already made his covenant promise to you. He died on the cross and rose from the dead. He's pledged his life to you. When you make that decision, you're receiving what Jesus has done for you, and then you're pledging your life back. It would make no sense to get married, stand on an altar, pledge your life to someone else, and then live as if you didn't. You guys, we are getting what we're inviting people into. When you invite people just to pray a momentary prayer, we're getting the results of that, and the results are scary. Just so you know, I'm not taking crazy pills. I decided I'd pull up some statistics for you, okay? In 1990, Billy Graham himself said that only 25% of people who came forward to pray to receive Christ actually became Christians. 25%. Now, by the way, he didn't even base that number on any actual data or research. He based that on a biblical text, which is the parable of the soils. So data and research has been done, and it's actually 6%. 6% of all the people who came forward to pray at these evangelistic crusades actually became followers of Jesus. One of the largest evangelical denominations reported in 1995 that they had 348,057 decisions to follow Jesus that year. But when they followed up a year later, only 6% could be found following Jesus and connected to any kind of church community. Eternity Magazine has been studying this for a long time. They report as far back as 1997 that evangelistic crusades only locate 3% of those claiming to have made a decision and being part of a church community. Here's a crazy study. There were two large missionary evangelistic campaigns that went overseas, and they had the Jesus film, so they'd show the Jesus film and then invite people to make a decision. One went to Indonesia, the other one went to Thailand. In Indonesia, they had 85,000 people make decisions for Jesus. 85,000. In Thailand, 35,000. That's a lot of decisions. Problem is, they went back a year later, could not find a single person following Jesus. Not one. You guys, the recidivism rates are alarming. This is scary stuff. I'm submitting to you that we're getting what we're inviting people to step into. Because we're inviting them to pray a momentary prayer where they just intellectually assent to a couple beliefs, we end up with a faith that's dead, which James 2 talks about. If you had cancer, you guys, and there was a 6% chance that this treatment option would give you healing, would you not seek other treatment options? Yeah? I'm pretty sure you would. So notice, I'm not against making followers. That's what I'm passionate about. I'm just questioning our primary methodology for doing that because it's not working. It's not working. And I don't want to discredit anybody here who has come to faith through a simple prayer. Absolutely not. My guess is God was working on your heart for months before that moment. He was just confirming what was already true in your life. But listen, I was talking to Jim Dawson this week. He and I met. He's an amazing man who's been here for a long time. Came to faith at a Billy Graham crusade. Josiah's dad, the one who leads worship, came to faith watching Billy Graham on TV. So I'm talking with Jim Dawson, and he goes, I've always been grateful that I'm a sixer, part of the 6%. I'm deeply concerned about the other 94. What about the other 94? See, at the very least, I think when we don't invite them into authentic discipleship, where you actually become a follower of Jesus, we risk giving them a false assurance. And then what's worse is we end up setting them up to live a duplicitous lifestyle where you claim to believe one thing, but you actually live in a totally different way. You claim to follow Jesus, but you don't live anything like him. Like, we get what we're inviting people into, and what we're creating is a bunch of unsalty salt. A bunch of people who claim one thing, but don't live that way in their everyday lives. And we shouldn't be surprised by this, because that's what we're asking people to step into. And again, just so you know, I'm not taking crazy pills. Here's some studies and statistics that support there's really no difference between Christians and non-Christians. Again, when you invite people to follow Jesus and you're not really inviting them to do that, it's just a prayer, and they walk out and nothing's changed, it's because that's what you told them to do. And the net effect of this is a culture of unsalty salt who claims to be salty. This is true. There's really no difference between Christians and non-Christians in the area of marriage. According to a 1999 national survey done by Barna, the percentage of born-again Christians that year who experienced divorce was higher at 26% than that of non-Christians, 22%. Barna also found that 90% of all the born-again folks who got divorced did so after they became Christians. 90% of those who got divorced did so after they made the decision to follow Jesus. According to a study by McKinley and Irvin, one of the variables that actually increases your chance of divorce is living in an area with a high population of evangelical Christians. So if you live on a street with a bunch of evangelical Christians, that actually increases your chance of divorce. I don't even have categories for that. Same thing when it comes to pornography. No real difference between Christians and non-Christians. 68% of church-going men view porn on a regular basis. 68%. For young Christians ages 18 to 24, 76% confess that they actively search for porn on a regular basis. And just so you know, this isn't just a male thing, it's also a female thing. Only 13% of Christian women say they have never viewed pornography, meaning 87% of Christian women have viewed pornography at some point in time in their lives. Same thing when it comes to giving and generosity, materialism and consumerism. No real difference between Christians and non-Christians, the way they relate to money and income. In 2002, a Barna study, it was discovered that only 6% of born-again adults tithed. So only 6% of people who come to church on a regular basis give at least 10% of their income. 37% of evangelical Christians who attend church every week don't give any money to their local church. Do you hear that? Almost 40% of people who consider themselves evangelical, born-again Christians, almost 40% don't give anything to the local mission of the church that they attend. The trends are the same. You guys, we're no different. The more money we make, the more we spend on ourselves and the less we give away. You guys following this? Jesus, he upped the intensity of his teaching. We lower the bar, and the result is we have a lot of unsalty salt. People who claim to follow Jesus but live nothing like him. And make no mistake about it, this is not lost on the watching world. So again, Barna has done a lot of research here where he's asked how non-Christians view Christians. And this one study he did, he asked non-Christians about their attitudes towards different Christian groups. And he found that less than 1/5 of Americans, 22% to be exact, have a positive view of evangelical Christians. Which means if you're out and about, 1 in 5 people who are non-Christians will have a positive view of evangelicals. 1 in 5. And he concludes this study by saying, listen to this very carefully, every day, the church is becoming more like the world it allegedly seeks to change. Every day, the church is becoming more like the world it allegedly seeks to change. Large crowds are following Jesus. Jesus' primary focus is making disciples, not interested in just attracting big crowds for the sake of a large audience. When the crowd gets big, he ups the intensity of his teaching to help people own their level of commitment. What I'm naming today is we do the exact opposite. We're obsessed with large crowds, not making disciples. When the crowds get big, we don't up the intensity of our teaching. We lower the bar, and now we're living with the results, which is tons of people who profess to follow Jesus but live nothing like him. And I'm submitting to you this is a massive problem. Now, if you're wanting me to put a bow on this is that moment where I'm like, oh, how do I wrap this up? I noticed Jesus didn't really wrap it up. He left them in a place of tension, right? So let me make 2 suggestions for you today. Number 1, if we're going to pattern our lives after Jesus, let's focus on multiplying disciples rather than trying to attract bigger and bigger crowds. The mission of this church isn't, you're not going to see it on our website. Our mission is to get lots of people to come here. The mission of this church is to make disciples. because we're trying to follow Jesus and prioritize what he prioritized. Secondly, we're going to keep inviting people to follow Jesus here. Make no mistake about it. I know the rumors out there. We're going to keep inviting people to follow Jesus on a regular basis at this church, but we're also going to challenge them to count the cost beforehand. We're going to invite them to actually become followers of Jesus. That's what we're about. So here's your homework for this week. What's one area of your life that you need to surrender? So if you're a follower of Jesus and you're like, yep, he's my Lord, this happens. Sometimes one thing kind of creeps up and it becomes more important, and Jesus gently points this out to us. What's one area in your life that's kind of got that first spot and put Jesus in that second spot? I want you to name that with him this week. There's grace, there's love, there's mercy. But make the flip. Make Jesus first. You'll be a better parent when your kids aren't first in your life, but Jesus is first. Yeah? Secondly, do you want to become a follower of Jesus? You know what I mean? Like, this passage is about an invitation to count the cost and become a follower of Jesus. So if you're here today and you're like, man, I just prayed that prayer and nothing's changed, or I'm here and I've never prayed that prayer before, or whatever, I will be up here after the service. Would love to talk with you and pray with you, welcome you into our church family, and help you get started following Jesus in your everyday life. Our pastoral team will also be out in the foyer. They'd love to talk to you as well. Yeah? Thanks for bearing with me today. Let's stand for closing prayer. God, we thank you for this free gift of salvation, this universal invitation to your banquet. And yet we also confess that this surrendering piece can be difficult and challenging. Thank you for your grace, and give us the grace to surrender completely, give you that top spot in our lives. And I pray that you would help us have the right priorities as a church community, that we would live our lives as disciples to make disciples, and that we'd leave and surrender the results and the outcomes to you. For we ask this in the name of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Amen.